You got tossed aside like something no longer worth keeping. The person who used to hold your hand now walks past you like you were never part of their story. They've thrown up walls so thick that even the memory of you can't get through. But nobody talks about what's actually happening behind those walls, about the thing an avoidant person can't even admit to themselves. Distance doesn't kill a feeling, silence doesn't erase a bond, and the quiet they've buried themselves in eventually turns into something they can't stand. They will circle back, not because they're weak, but because the exact defense mechanism they leaned on to feel safe slowly turns into a cage, and that cage is what pushes them back toward you. Avoidant attachment runs on a contradiction that eats at a person from the inside out. They want closeness, and they're terrified of it at the same time, every single day. When they pulled away from you, that wasn't really about you. It was them trying to escape the panic of being vulnerable, the unbearable weight of actually needing another person. Their nervous system reads intimacy as a threat, reads closeness as being trapped, reads depending on someone as a danger to their survival. So they bolted. They shut the whole thing down and told themselves being free mattered more than being loved, that being alone was a fair trade for not being suffocated. What they never expect is what happens after they leave. The relief they were counting on doesn't stick around, it curdles into something much heavier. The space they carved out for themselves fills up with an emptiness that sounds exactly like your absence. They wake up expecting to feel light and instead feel gutted. The freedom they were chasing turns out to be nothing but a hollow room. Their own mind, which used to be so good at explaining away the distance, starts working against them. Memories creep back in, feelings show up that no amount of logic can talk down. To keep themselves walking away, the avoidant builds a case against you. They tally your flaws, blow your imperfections out of proportion, invent reasons why the two of you were never going to work. For a while, this mental trickery does its job. It gives them cover. But the heart isn't built on arguments. It runs on attachment, on bonds, on something that sits underneath conscious thought. No matter how long the list of reasons gets, some part of them knows the truth. They cut off something they actually needed and walked away from someone who mattered more than they're willing to say out loud. Here's where it gets strange. Once they've successfully put distance between you two, your absence starts to take up space in their head in a way your presence never did. You stop being a real, flawed, complicated person and start becoming something closer to a perfect memory, a phantom version of you that follows them into every quiet moment. This isn't sentimentality. It's their attachment system finally relaxing because the threat, meaning you, meaning closeness, is gone, which frees up room for them to actually feel what they lost. Slowly, only the good stuff survives in their memory. The way you used to laugh becomes something they can't shake. The comfort you gave them becomes a warmth nothing else replicates. The way you understood them becomes something they keep reaching for and not finding. In this stretch, they live with a strange kind of internal war. Consciously, they tell themselves they made the smart call, that they needed room to breathe, that relationships are just traps waiting to close. But underneath, their attachment system is shouting something completely different, that they gave up something they can't replace, that they cut loose a bond they genuinely craved. That gap between what they're telling themselves and what they're feeling becomes almost impossible to sit in. They start feeling your absence more intensely than they ever felt your presence. The solitude they thought they wanted turns out to be empty and pointless. Every new person who comes along gets quietly measured against you, and every one of them comes up short because a memory doesn't have bad moods, doesn't ask for anything, doesn't press on old wounds. The version of you living in their head becomes more vivid than anyone standing in front of them. You become the bar nothing else can clear. They remember how you got them without judgment, how you gave them room when they needed it, how you stayed even when they were emotionally unreachable. What conveniently slips their mind is how they took all of that for granted, how they punished you for caring, how they made you shrink for having needs in the first place. Their memory edits itself in their favor, painting you as flawless and themselves as the fool who let something rare slip away. That idealized version of the story creates real internal pressure. They start to believe they had something they'll never come across again. Suddenly, the world is full of people who feel too needy or too cold, too much or somehow never enough, and none of them are you. None of them hit that particular mix of comfort and familiarity you gave them without even trying. They start to understand, slowly, that their fear of losing independence actually cost them something far more valuable, a real connection with someone who accepted them exactly as they were. That phantom version of you shows up in the quiet hours, lying awake at night, going through routines, in the middle of something they would have once shared with you. Your absence becomes its own kind of presence, filling spaces you used to occupy. They wonder what you're up to, whether you ever think about them, whether you've already moved forward. And the idea of you with someone new stirs up a jealousy they didn't know they were capable of, a possessiveness that contradicts every story they told themselves about not needing anybody. Avoidant people lean on what amounts to deactivation tactics, mental strategies built to bury the need for closeness, to convince themselves they're fine solo, to keep emotional distance intact. The scripts sound familiar. Relationships don't really matter. Independence is everything. Feelings are a liability. Needing someone is embarrassing. These scripts hold up fine as long as you're still there, still trying, still reachable. Your presence basically proves their point, and every attempt you make to get closer just confirms their theory that closeness is suffocating. But once you're actually gone, those same defense mechanisms start breaking down because they need something to push against, and there's nothing left to resist. At first, there's a wave of relief. The pressure lifts, they can finally exhale, and they throw themselves into work or hobbies or anything that keeps their hands busy and their mind elsewhere. But deactivation only works when there's an active threat to fight off, your texts to dodge, your calls to skip, your feelings to downplay. Without you chasing them, without that imagined pressure, their defenses have nothing left to guard against. The walls that once felt protective start to feel like solitary confinement. The independence they were so proud of starts to feel less like freedom and more like a sentence. Their attachment system, no longer on high alert, starts admitting what it's been hiding. They miss you. They need you. They think they messed this up badly. This doesn't arrive gently. It hits like a crisis. Their whole sense of self, built around not needing anyone, starts cracking. Who even are they if not the person who's fine on their own? What does it mean that the independence they worked so hard to protect now feels like a punishment instead of a reward? The questions keep coming in waves, dismantling years of carefully built psychological armor, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to hide behind. This is when they feel something they rarely let themselves feel: real, aching longing. Not a passing spark for someone new, but a deep pull toward the exact connection they had with you. It scares them because it goes against everything they believed about who they are. They're supposed to be the ones who don't need anybody, the ones above all this, and yet here they are, stuck on you, replaying old memories, guessing what you're doing, picturing you with someone else, feeling a jealousy so sharp it catches them off guard. The collapse of their old defenses forces them to face a lie they'd been living, that they were fine alone, that solitude suited them, that connection was optional rather than something they actually required. The body doesn't lie the way the mind does. It knows exactly what it needs to feel safe and steady. Once every excuse, every rationalization, every clever justification gets stripped away, what's left is plain need for you, need for connection, need for the love they pushed out the door. This phase often shows up physically. Sleep gets hard because their brain won't stop looping through what they lost. Food loses its appeal in the quiet of being alone. Energy drains fast because fighting your own wiring is exhausting. They might cry without warning, blindsided by feelings too big to manage their body, finally saying out loud what their mind kept refusing to admit. They're hurting, they're grieving, and they're paying the cost of ignoring a basic human need. When an avoidant person decides to come back, it's rarely a spur-of-the-moment thing. They've been sitting with it for weeks, sometimes months, rehearsing what to say, lining up excuses for their silence, prepping explanations that let them save face while still leaving the door open. The comeback is planned, but the panic underneath it is genuine. They'll reach out with a tone that looks casual on the surface, testing whether you'll even respond. Their pulse spikes while they wait, even though they'd never say that out loud. It might start small: a meme, a song, a memory dressed up as harmless nostalgia, hoping you'll do the heavy lifting and welcome them back without making them own what they did. Underneath that careful approach is real fear. They're terrified you've already moved on, that someone else is giving you what they couldn't, that their shot at fixing this has already closed. That fear pushes them harder than being with you ever did. Scarcity lights something up in them that comfort never could. The thought of truly losing you makes them braver than commitment ever managed to. They start romanticizing what you had, quietly skipping over all the ways they wrecked it. Your patience gets reframed as proof of love, your understanding as proof you were right for each other, your tolerance for their limits as a gift they'll never find twice. Coming back isn't only about wanting you again, it's about facing the fact that their whole strategy for coping has fallen apart. Running didn't bring the peace they expected. Distance didn't clear their head. Isolation didn't make them stronger. What it actually revealed: is that the emotional dependency they were so afraid of had been sitting inside them the entire time, whether they admitted it or not. Denying it didn't erase it. It just left them confused, wondering why nothing felt right anymore, why every day felt slightly off, why the freedom they'd fought so hard for tasted like nothing at all. Reaching out stirs up an anxiety that mirrors the same intimacy they usually run from. Their hands shake, typing the message. They delete it and rewrite it more times than they'd admit, trying to land somewhere between casual and sincere, interested but not too eager. It's an emotional balancing act, trying to find the exact wording that opens your heart without fully cracking open their own. That tug of war between wanting connection and needing to protect themselves is the whole conflict in miniature. They want closeness badly, but only on terms that don't leave them feeling exposed or needy. Once that first message is sent, waiting becomes its own kind of torture. Every silent minute feels like proof they've lost you for good. They check their phone obsessively, stress hormones flooding their system. If you respond warmly, relief crashes over them, almost euphoric. If you don't respond, or respond flatly, they spiral part despair, part a strange defensive anger, as if some part of them expects to be welcomed back instantly, even while the rest of them braces for rejection. That contradiction entitlement, tangled up with fear, is baked right into how they process the moment. Coming back often skips the real accountability that actual repair requires. They'd rather leap past the hard conversations, why they left, how it hurt you, what actually needs to change, and go straight to the comfort of reconnecting without doing the uncomfortable work first. It isn't cruelty, it's self-protection. Facing their own failures and fears in full requires a level of exposure that still scares them, so instead, they offer half apologies, vague nods toward wrongdoing, attempts to move forward without really looking back at what happened. Coming back also forces them into the one thing they've spent their whole life dodging: real vulnerability. They have to say they were wrong. They have to admit they need you. They have to acknowledge that their independence was mostly a performance and leaving was a mistake. Internally, this is a battle. Every admission feels like weakness. Every expressed need feels like betraying who they thought they were. And yet they push through it anyway, because staying away has become worse than facing the discomfort of coming clean. This vulnerability tends to show up as a kind of desperation that surprises everyone involved, including them. Someone who avoided commitment starts bringing up the future. Someone who could barely say, "I love you," says it now with an intensity bordering on begging. Someone who needed space suddenly can't handle being apart. It's not manipulation, even if it looks that way from the outside. It's the pendulum swinging hard in the other direction. Years of suppressed attachment come rushing out at once, and because they never learned how to regulate feelings this big, it all just floods out unfiltered. For the first time, they're feeling things, with a rawness they've spent their whole life dodging, exposed, unguarded, scared you'll do to them what they did to you. The roles have completely flipped, and they know it. Now they're the ones chasing, the ones reading into every silence, the ones wondering if it's already too late. It's brutal for them, because they finally understand what they put you through: the ache of uncertainty, of wanting someone who might not want you back, of realizing love takes more courage than they were sure they had. This crisis often drags up their oldest wounds, childhood moments that taught them love came with strings, that closeness led to pain, that needing people ended in being left. Those memories surface with a clarity they can no longer bury under old habits of shutting down. They start to see how their childhood survival tactics quietly became the very thing sabotaging their adult relationships. It's a painful realization and a freeing one, at the same time painful because of how much their fear has already cost them. Freeing because seeing it clearly is the first real step toward doing something different. In this stage, some avoidants break down in ways they never have before. Tears they've swallowed for years finally come out. Words they've never said out loud finally get spoken. Needs they've never voiced finally surface. It's cathartic and disorienting all at once, like a dam giving way after holding back years of pressure. They might not know how to handle the intensity, swinging between saying everything and shutting down completely. Their system's still trying to protect them, even as it lets the walls down. The hardest part hits when they realize vulnerability isn't a one-time performance they can check off and move past. It's not a single apology or grand gesture that fixes everything. It's a daily practice choosing to stay open, even when every instinct is screaming at them to shut the door. That realization can feel crushing. They assumed coming back was the hard part. They didn't expect that staying open, staying close, staying vulnerable would demand ongoing effort that pushes against every protective habit they've spent a lifetime building. Here's the painful truth nobody wants to hear. Coming back doesn't automatically mean they've changed. They've had a wake-up call, sure. They've faced their fear, sure. They're willing to try vulnerability, sure. But the underlying wiring, the deep fear of being swallowed up, the panic that closeness triggers in their body, doesn't just vanish because they've had a moment of clarity. The same person begging to come back might months later, once things feel safe and settled again, feel that same old urge to bolt. Not because the love isn't real, but because their nervous system still reads sustained closeness as a threat. That's why a return like this is both genuine and, at the same time, uncertain. The longing is real, the regret is real, the love is real, but so is the fear, and none of that disappears just because they've named it out loud. When they come back, they're driven by loss and longing feelings strong enough to briefly override their old patterns. But once the relationship settles back in and intimacy deepens again, those old instincts can resurface. It isn't about you becoming less appealing. It's the closeness itself that starts tripping the same alarms. Too close, too much, time to disappear. This leaves the avoidant caught in an ongoing tug between two versions of themselves. One part has genuinely grown, recognizes what connection is worth, wants to do things differently this time. The other part, wired much earlier and much deeper, is still running old code. That creates a push and pull even inside their own head, wanting closeness and wanting to escape it, loving you and resenting how much they need you, appreciating your presence and feeling boxed in by it, sometimes in the same breath. None of this means they're lying to you. It just reflects how hard it actually is to rewire attachment patterns that were set in childhood. Coming back is only step one. To actually change, they have to keep working against the wiring itself, question their automatic reactions, sit with discomfort instead of fleeing it, and slowly build new associations where closeness reads as safety instead of danger. That's not something that happens through good intentions alone. It usually takes therapy, real self-awareness, and sustained effort well beyond a few heartfelt words. Without that ongoing work, a return like this just becomes another loop in a familiar cycle, pulling close, pulling away, promising to change, and slipping right back into the same pattern. Real change asks them to build a kind of tolerance for discomfort they've never had to develop. When closeness sets off their panic, when intimacy triggers the urge to flee, when vulnerability makes them want to disappear, they have to stay put anyway. They have to learn to breathe through it, to recognize it as an old fear rather than a real threat, and to choose to stay, even when every instinct in their body is telling them to run. That's genuinely hard work, it means. Feeling everything they've spent a lifetime avoiding, sitting in discomfort they used to escape without a second thought. Even so, there's something meaningful in the fact that they came back at all. It's an admission that connection matters more than comfort, that some people are worth confronting your fears for, that love, even with all its risk and demand and exposure, beats the cold certainty of being alone forever. When someone this guarded comes back and lays it out, they're admitting they can't outlogic their own heart, can't argue their way out of missing you, can't convince themselves they're better off solo. Coming back takes a kind of courage, even without any promise it'll last. It's them choosing to try, to risk being wrong again, to bet that maybe this time it turns out differently, that love can repair what fear broke, and that closeness can slowly retrain a nervous system that spent years bracing for danger. None of this unfolds cleanly. There will be good days when opening up feels possible, and bad days when disappearing feels easier. Progress, then backsliding. Opening up, then shutting down again. But every time they choose to stay instead of run, to talk instead of withdraw, to sit with the discomfort instead of escaping it, they're laying down a new pattern, teaching their own nervous system that closeness doesn't have to end in disaster, that needing someone isn't a weakness, that love is worth what it costs. In the end, this isn't a decision made once. It's one they have to keep making, day after day, in small moments, choosing connection over comfort, honesty over safety, love over fear, again and again, for as long as it takes.